everyone, and welcome to another Other Talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. This is the extra talk that we do every third Sunday of the month, and it takes place at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time currently. And we also have our usual talk this evening at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. But for those of you who are here or watching on the replay, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to have you two. By the way, I'm one of your hosts, Nor Kyle, along with
me, Mushtaq Ali, who is not Nur Kyle.
And we're going to have Mushtaq do our YouTube spiel. Everyone sit tight. We got to do this. Unfortunately, it's important.
All right. If you are watching us on YouTube right now, first of all, welcome if this is your first time. Welcome back if it's your second or third or 100th time. And we have a plea to you. Help us stick it to the man. Help us be able to demonetize our videos without having to show porn every 15 minutes or something to get it off of the thing. Because we don't want you to have ads, and we can't do that until we have reached 1,000 subscribers. And we're like halfway there now. It's very exciting. So close. So once we reach 1,000 subscribers, we can join the YouTube partners, and then we can just manually demonetize each of our videos, because we don't want you to be subjected to ads for things that we hate, or even mildly dislike for that matter. So that's the spiel. Down there, hit that like button first of all, because we like your likes. It gets us up in the YouTube algorithm. And hit the subscribe button and hit the little bell so you can be notified when we put up much of our groovy content. There's going to be a lot of good stuff coming next month, because Nora is going to be on vacation for a month. And so I will have nothing to do. So I'll sit around and talk to the computer all day long and make little video clips for you.
There you go. Got to keep yourself occupied somehow.
Yeah. So take it, Nora.
All right, so today's special because this is going to be the first time I've really intentionally decided to take the lead on a talk. This is a big step for me. So with that said, let's get started. Today, I decided I wanted to talk about responsibility. And the way that I framed this talk is talking about figuring out what our own responsibilities and priorities are in our own lives. And this is going to be from a Sufi perspective, specifically the Nine-Sided Circle Sufi perspective, specifically mine, with a little bit of Mushtaq's as well. And you'll see that this is an invitation to kind of really embrace what we do on this path from your unique vantage point. So, let me pull up my notes. All right, so first of all, what does it mean when we say the word responsibility? So, to be responsible means to be trustworthy, dependable, reliable, and I've heard it described as being able to respond. And what we're responding to are the things that we have chosen, we have committed ourselves to, rather, either by choice or out of necessity, to be responsive to. So, first of all, we have to start from the bottom up, and that means we have to talk about agency. Where is it exactly that we do have control over our own lives in order to be responsive, to be responsible? And as we know from research that has been done on this subject, about 60% of all those things going on in our lives, circumstances, all that stuff, 60% is out of our hands. It's out of our control. Whereas the other 40%, those are the things that we do potentially have control over. And what is included in that 40% is probably kind of surprising, because we'll find that that 40% contains both more and less than we expect it to. So, we talked previously about constraints on reality. Let's talk, what are a couple of basic constraints on reality that pretty much all of us are subject to?
Well, we are subject to biological constraints.
Mm-hmm.
We can only see light between certain wavelengths, from the red touching the infrared up to the violet just below the ultraviolet. That's all we can see. Hearing, we can only hear during certain, between certain wavelengths of sound. And smell. Our smell is not very good. If we were a dog, we would know all sorts of things about the world through our sense of smell, but we're humans, so we maybe know when somebody's cooking dinner. All of these are constraints upon the model at a biological level, and everybody is stuck with them.
Yep. And some of these constraints will also be cultural constraints. We can't control the culture we're born into. We can't really control how people racialize us when they see us. Things like that, we do not necessarily have control over. But there are many things that we do have control over. And this is where what we call free will comes in. So we have both things that we cannot control, a lack of free will, as well as things that we can control and be in connection with, in conversation with in our lives. And that's where free will lies. And we've done some videos about that in the past. So I recommend that we do a link to those, if we can remember exactly which videos they were. So there's that. But also, where free will lies is going to be in the things that we can change, we can accept, we can get rid of. So these things probably include your job, various relationships in your life, the location of where you live, your living arrangement, to some degree your physical health, and also where you place your focus of attention. So all of these things are going to be somewhat more under your control than the things that Mushtaq mentioned. And that's, of course, going to be to varying degrees, depending on the unique constraints on your life and the things that you were born into. However, as participants in our own lives, and doing things like practicing due diligence, which is probably another talk that we should link to, which means that you do everything you can up until the point where you just can't, and you have to surrender to the circumstances and let things play out as they will. We all have to go through this. And yet, that's a process. That's a process that is predictable, and we can plan around it. We can plan that that's going to happen. And that does allow us a greater degree of control. And of course, when things get challenging, we can always utilize the fundamental breath work that we always do. And that gives us the grounding that we need in any given moment to be present and to take action in a way that gives us agency. And as we'll see, giving ourselves agency through things like breath practice and trusting the process as we are participants in it, those build up our agency. But of course, these are the things that we need to contemplate for ourselves. So this first question here is, what do I have control over? Where is my agency? And that's a question you might not be able to answer alone, which is why my second question for contemplation is, who can I talk to for sound and balanced feedback when I want help in gaining clarity about where I have agency or what my challenges might be that I need to come to terms with? And this is going to be a person who you trust. This is going to be a person who can both give you feedback and be a support to you within the context of wanting to see you grow and succeed and build up your sense of agency. So if you don't have at least one suitable person, part of your responsibility may be to start looking. So this can be a therapist, maybe a hotline counselor, a wise friend or family member, a mentor, a teacher. So as you guys already know, the school has been established in large part to serve as a resource for this purpose. And that goes in multiple directions, because teachers and students alike are meant to kind of serve as a support system for one another. And while any given person might have their own stuff going on, it's like we're learning from each other all the time. It's like the presence that we have here, even in this talk today, that serves as a way to bolster one another. And someone you talk to, someone who you consider wise and supportive, is going to be someone that you can discuss, where am I not seeing where my agency lies? Or what am I taking on that really isn't necessarily my issue to take on? That's what I mean by clarity. Are you guys following so far? I want to check in and see if we have any questions right now so far. Or any thoughts you want to share? Sydney says, doing great. Chris, I'm glad you made it. Hi. Okay, good. So I'll continue, because I think eventually I would love to invite people to chime in about some places where they might be okay, so first of all, let me ask you guys, where are some areas in which you might have more agency than you think you do? Anyone got any thoughts on that? What do you think, Weil?
I think perhaps our mood.
Yeah.
I think we tend to, or if I speak on my own behalf, I tend to maybe blame or give agency away with regards to my own mood. But perhaps the reality is I have more agency there than I might think.
Absolutely. That's a really great example. Yeah. And originally I wrote mindset as one of my ways in which we might have more agency than we think. But I think there's a way that can become pressuring. But if we realize for ourselves, rather than someone being like, you need to change your mindset, because, that can feel like an encroachment in some ways. And sometimes it needs to be said, of course. But if we're in a place where we can realize that from within, it's going to be so much stronger force for agency. So I think it's really cool that you're kind of, feeling that for yourself in terms of mood. Wow, that's great. Awesome. All right. So yeah, so I do think a lot of us, in terms of finding someone who can be a source of support, there are moments when we probably feel like there is no one. And sometimes for some people, there really may be no one. But that's why I say it is an important aspect of our sense of responsibility to acknowledge that if we need to, and then find a way to resolve it. And that's why I suggest, even if it's just someone you call up on a hotline who you never talk to again, perhaps, you got to start somewhere. You need someone to help you build yourself up. And if you can work up to a therapist, that's great. And if you have like a mentor in your life, that's even better. But sometimes we need to build these relationships up, and that's why I say we can start with a stranger. And of course, you know, if you need that person and you're part of our community, I hope you will reach out either to myself or to Mush Talk or to anyone in our community who is, you know, putting themselves out there as someone who is embracing that role. And we do have some folks doing that, so I definitely encourage you to embrace that as well, because perhaps you could play that role yourself. And if not for someone in the nine-sided circle, then, you know, in your life at large. All right. But the thing to keep in mind is that, you know, even after seeking input and gaining it from someone else, you are 100% responsible for the actions you take. And this gets us back to the idea of being a human adult, which is one of our goals here, is to make sure we're all headed in that direction. And that means that we do need to embrace both the rewards and the consequences of whatever actions we take. So that's important too. So my third question was inspired by a book I read some time ago, which I don't 100% recommend, but I found it useful. And it was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. And there were parts of this book which I loved, and they really, I would call it kind of a tongue-in-cheek celebration of personal agency. That's what I would call this book. And there are things in it that I both loved and hated. That's why I can't give it 100% recommendation. I'd probably give it 3 stars just because I feel like there's meat in there that's worth talking about. And that's why our third question is going to be, what do I give my fucks about? And what I mean by that is that this is about discerning the best investment of the life force we have, both in the short term and the long term. The fucks we have to give are limited. The energy that we have to give day to day is limited. Some people have talked about spoon theory. This is something that people with disabilities use as a metaphor to talk about how they allot their energy for daily activities. They have to prioritize. They have to. And so, in terms of what we give a fuck about, where do we start with that? Well, first of all, we have to start with letting things be as they already are, as Adyashanti always says. And in this case, I'm saying that worrying about and quote-unquote caring about something does not necessarily create change in this world, especially not positive change, because draining your energy by quote-unquote caring about things, worrying about things, perseverating about things, spreading yourself thin, it's going to be detrimental to your ability to produce positive change, whether that's in your own life, in the lives of people around you. Anxiety, guys. The lives of people around you, or, you know, the world at large. And I think we do get wrapped up in things that we honestly should and have to care about. Things like climate change, racism, economic inequality, but we know that we can't solve those things alone. So this is where that thing we talk about, plugging the leaks, comes in. How are we frittering our energy away, worrying about things that in this very moment we cannot necessarily do very much about? You can't expect yourself to care about all issues and people at all times. It's a worthy, it's a worthy goal, but it is definitely something that human beings cannot necessarily manage. So what we call values, this is a related thing to responsibilities. What we consider values are ultimately about prioritization. And your specific priorities may be unique to you, and they may evolve over time with increased life experience. And I think we'll all find that to be true. I know for me, the things that I was like shaking my fist about in my teens, I mean, I definitely still care about those things, but I don't have that same kind of like impotent, anxiety, rage, all that stuff. I don't carry that so much with me anymore. And that means that I'm not wasting energy in those directions in which it's just kind of like spinning the wheels. We don't want to do that. So we need to figure out where our values really lie by considering what really matters to us when all external considerations are stripped away. So if your culture is telling you, you better believe this, you better do that, what happens when you don't have that burden on you just for a moment? It's just something to think about. So, as far as Mark Manson is concerned, this is the guy who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. He says that good values are, they are reality-based. It's going to be 3 things. So they're reality-based, socially constructive, and immediate and controllable. They can be achieved internally, which means you don't have to worry about someone else's behavior in order to make it happen for you. You don't have to worry about stuff going on outside of you and whether that's going to impede your ability to manifest your values. So we're talking about things like honesty, innovation, vulnerability, standing up for yourself, standing up for others, self-respect, curiosity, charity, humility, creativity. And these are a few I came up with myself: loyalty, sustainability, equanimity, and intersubjectivity, which, as we've talked about before, that is the subject to subject relating. We consider that a very important value. So, again, according to Mark Manson, bad values, on the other hand, are disconnected from reality, socially destructive, and not immediate or controllable. And they're generally reliant on external events, what other people are doing again, or what's happening outside of you. So these are things like dominance through manipulation or violence, indiscriminate fucking, feeling good all the time, always being the center of attention, not being alone, being liked by everybody, being rich for the sake of being rich. And of course, for us, I'm including treating any beings as objects. So does that make sense so far, guys? Yeah. Because I think sometimes we misconstrue imposed values for our own values. And there may be similarities there. You know, there may be overlaps there. But, you know, let's say we're part of a church community, and one of the things that they value is, you know, marriage being between a man and a woman. See, I personally am part of the queer community, so a church where that part of me is not welcome is not going to be a place where I can practice my values. My values include acceptance of relationships that do not fit that image. So that's what I mean. Or if we are, you know, living within a culture where showing affection for someone we love in public is a public offense. I mean, we do kind of have a constraint upon us in which we may not want to practice our value of always, you know, expressing love for our partner through touch within that milieu, even if it is a value that we hold dear for us in our intimate lives. Does that make sense? Cool. So, here's the thing. When you figure out what you give a fuck about, you cannot expect yourself to be able to take action on those specific things all the time. And that's because we have limited energy, and sometimes we do need to turn inward and just, you know, be zen and chill out. That's so that we can replenish the energy that we need to live our values. That's what people are really meaning when they talk about self-care and stuff like that. Of course, self-care may be something that you value and something that you give a fuck about. So then even if you feel like you're shutting down, you are still in the work of practicing your values. I think that's really important for us to think about. Yeah, what's up, Jonathan?
So the two things that are most valuable to me, this is beyond what I essentially need to do to take care of myself, which is to go out and earn enough money and keep my basic health together. All that aside, the energy I'm left over with, the two things that are most valuable to me are my studies of the work and my practice of the exercises of the work, meditation and various things. But I cannot study for very long before I'm saturated. And I can't keep the exercises up. I just don't, for very long, I just don't have the mental concentration, the energy. So I think those two things I've mentioned fit into the category that you outlined. The problem comes, what am I going to spend the rest of my available time doing? I have to expand my life more. And it's always going to be, for me, interacting with people in some form, because those two things I mentioned, study and the work exercises, are very personal, alone things that I do by myself. The difficulties come when I'm drawn to interact with people. Then my lackings become very obvious to me.
When you say lackings, tell me a little more about what you mean.
Well, enough for me. Nothing makes me more aware of where I am inadequate than when I'm interacting with people on a more personal level.
Inadequate. Say more about that.
So I have this vision of myself that of being. I'll go back to question 2, which is agency. My problem is I feel I have too higher of opinion of my personal agency. I believe I'm in control of myself in much more than I in reality am. And I know you want me to give a good example, and
it's okay. I mean, I just wanted to make sure that I understood clearly.
Yeah, it's I feel my lacking in intelligence comes out, or my lacking in being sensitive to people comes out when I interact with them, and I do things that are just like, oh, why did I say that, or why can't I think of a response, a good response, so people will think well of me, like, he's part of. We accept him because he knows how he knows what to say. He knows how to please us.
I can understand
he
those
brings
desires.
value to the group.
You do bring value to the group. I hope you know that.
But then I'm part of this group because I feel confident I can bring something to the group. But there's other forms of socializing that it stretches me.
Well, on the one hand, I think stretching is good. On the other, I mean, I think it's almost guaranteed that there are ways in which you're, in whatever circumstances are unique to you, that you're being a little bit hard on yourself, and it's kind of like there's a little bit of, I think for any of us, this is true. So this is not a call out to you specifically. Gosh, that's a loud airplane. Sorry, guys. Distracting.
You could sing loudly until the airplane is gone.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
We could start around, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream.
That might work for Zoom, but it might be challenging. Having taught singing really lessons over Zoom. Come on, guys. All right.
It's like going in a circle over our heads.
Yeah.
It's much louder for you guys than it is for us. I can hear you very clearly.
Good
to know.
I mean, I could hear it through Mush Talks and over my head, so it was confusing me. Okay, so, as I was saying, we all do this thing where we kind of get this simultaneously small, shrunken, afraid ego thing going on, and also this huge, oh my god, I have to manage everything at all times thing going on. I think the vast majority of us experience both of those in some way. And either way, we are not practicing the awake state under those circumstances, for sure. I mean, that is definitely ego, narcissistic stuff. And I'm not saying that as a call out in any way. I'm just saying that it's something that we can all kind of accept as part of our process in this. Because it's going to come up. It's going to come up that we're like, oh, I should have said this different thing to this friend, and now they're depressed and they're isolating from everyone now because of that thing that I said. I mean, you can only take so much responsibility for what people do with the things that you say to them, for example. You're not in their head, and you certainly can't control what goes on in there in response to the things that you say. You can only do the best that you can do, and that's going to be different from moment to moment and day to day. And maybe there are moments where everything aligns and we feel like we said just the right amazing thing, and it was so perfect, and it had the reaction and the response that we were craving, and the person went away feeling like, wow, that was such a relieving experience, and I feel so special and empowered, and it just changed my life. In those moments, I think as Sufis we tend to say wholeheartedly that wasn't necessarily us, that wasn't our ego. That was us kind of being a conduit for something beyond our ego that was able to use us in a positive way to connect with that person and give them what they needed. It's not always going to be like that. But if we assume that it's our magical powers that we did that, suddenly we have this burden of having or wanting to achieve that miraculous, moment of connection and all that stuff on our own. That's a lot of burden to carry. That's a lot of pressure. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So, yeah, that gets us to the fact that, pretty much the only way to care about everyone and everything right in this moment is to be wholly present, to experience the awake state. I mean, some people call this loving kindness or metta or whatever. This is that state of kind of this diffuse universal compassion that allows us to go beyond our limited selves and to embrace all that is all at once. But it's not going to necessarily be specific, and it's not necessarily going to be something that we can sustain for very long without practice. We're gonna fall off that wagon. It just happens, with me in the airplane. I get in the zone when I'm trying to teach, but I can get thrown off too. Whether it's by my own stumbling, my own anxiety rising up and overwhelming me a little bit, or it's loud sounds overhead that throw me off. It's just one of those things. So, as consciousness grows, responsibility grows, said Sydney. In a certain way, yes. Because consciousness, let's talk about it in this context as becoming a human adult. An adult is an adult because they're embracing responsibility. They're inviting it in. And they're ready to handle it, even if they fuck up. They're just I trust myself to commit. And committing doesn't necessarily mean things are working out. It just means that you are agreeing to participate in a way that exercises agency. Does that make sense? Good. Yes. So the more conscious we are, the more agency we achieve or embrace. I mean, it's kind of part and parcel that we're taking on more responsibility. More agency means more responsibility. More responsibility, in the sense of committing and embracing, means more agency. Those things go together. And if, loving the whole world is something that we want to do, then we need to be able to practice being grounded, being in the awake state. And we've talked a lot about that over the years, so I'm sure that's no surprise. So, with all this fancy talk aside, when we talk about giving a fuck, at the very least, you'd better give a fuck about the ones truly depending on you. This is a big deal. This is the next step. So this is going to be the next question, which is, who truly depends on me? So this is not about codependency. This is not about assuming responsibility for your friends who are going about their lives and struggling and having challenges, and they come to you and they're like, help, tell me what to do. You are not necessarily responsible for them. We're talking about the people who truly depend on you. And it starts with you yourself. You are dependent on you, first and foremost. This goes for each of us. This is so important that we consider that above all else, even more than our infant children, really, we depend on ourselves. There is no one else who can be there for us like we can be there for ourselves. And there's no one else who can fulfill that role if we decide to give it up. Does that make sense? Good. So who truly depends on you? That's going to be you. It's going to be your minor age children. It's going to be your domesticated pets. That's very important. Because they are domesticated, they need you for the most part. And of course, you can offer them up into someone else's care, but they are dependent on humans. And if you take responsibility for them, then you're committing to that relationship and you're committing to their care. So maybe in this collective of beings who depend on you, it might include your partner or partners, plural perhaps. It may be elderly parents. It may be a disabled loved one. It may be someone or someones that you have committed yourself through affirmative mutual consent to providing and caring for as pertaining to your occupation. So this is going to be like, at-home hospice care. People who go to, these nurses who go to someone's house and help them bathe and cook and things like that. That's going to be included in there too. So they have a responsibility to hold on to that job and make sure that that person is taken care of. They've committed to that. And even if they're getting a paycheck, there's something that is a spiritual and personal investment there in a lot of cases. So, if you take that on, you got to claim it. You got to own that. But I think this one is important because, as I said, we do tend to have that narcissistic ego inflation where we want to take on more. We imagine, rather, that people are dependent on us even when they're not. So if our person is having, or if our friend is having problems in their marriage, let's say, and we just are constantly chewing on everything that they tell us about that, and we're like, oh my God, I have to help them. Oh, this is horrible. Wow, I really hope they're doing okay. And that's kind of a, we can and should support them however we can, but they are not dependent on us and we are not dependent on them. That's the delineation I want to make here, because if we take on that perspective that there is a dependence there, that is an overstep in one direction or another against someone's agency somewhere in the picture. Because other people need to be free to make their own choices and their own mistakes and have their own successes and things like that. So we want to make sure that we don't encroach upon that. This is important. Because as we're defending our own agency and enacting our own agency, we can support others in doing the same by inviting them and not doing the work for them. Does that make sense? Otherwise, how are they going to become adults? How do they get the blessing of becoming a human adult? We don't want to take that away from them somehow. I mean, could we? Are we really able to do that? I think if we overstep and we manipulate people or pressure them or infantilize them, that is what we're doing. We don't want to do that. Or at least I don't. What do you think, Mishtak?
Yes. Got to turn on the microphone. There we go.
It was on and then you turned it off and then it was on.
Yeah, that's me. I think you're absolutely right about everything you say. I might emphasize a little bit more that one of the responsibilities that anybody has is to the person to whom they are in relationship with.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm glad you mentioned that because we've talked about the fruits of relationship a little bit before, and this is where those get to blossom, because being a participant in your relationship with your child or with your parents or your partner, I mean, if you're fully there, then you get so much more out of it. And they get so much more out of it. And there's this interdependence. So even though we're asking who is dependent on me from the context of like, who do I have to take into account in shaping my values and my priorities? In a sense, it's a mutual thing. Because even if our elderly parents aren't necessarily able to take care of us, they are still nurturing us in a way by being in relationship with us, even if we're caring for them.
Yeah. And in some ways, the most perfect of these is the relationship you have with your beloved.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is totally voluntary.
Yeah.
You didn't get to vote on having parents. You maybe got to vote on having kids, but you decided to have them, and that's that. But the person with whom you share your life, that's entirely something that you did completely, and that they did. And learning to act responsibly in those situations is really kind of important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. I think that's a big one because of the fact that it is something that we At least these days, right? Well, our beloved is going to be that person that we have voluntarily committed to.
Yeah. And who have voluntarily committed to you, unless you're
Yes.
really kind of sick and twisted.
Better that it's mutual, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Mushtaq.
There's a question that,
Yeah. Okay.
which is from Wael, which he sent. I don't know if you can all see it, but I think it's a good question. And it is worrying a form of irresponsibility?
I'm tempted to say yes. That's my intuitive sense, but I think in a sense, yes, and we will have a little bit more to say about that as I get into the last question. Let's put it that way.
And I have a couple of thoughts on that one as well.
Yeah, and I definitely want you to share them because I feel like that is your strong suit among so many others. All right. This is kind of an interesting question, and I think we can approach it with a creative mind. Let's put it that way. So this last question, this is about our dependence, and primarily, are we acknowledging our dependence on God? And we can couch that term God however we want to. The universe, the force, the one, al-haq.
Flying spaghetti monster.
Sure, yeah, whatever works. But what we have to realize is that we are always dependent. Always, even when we are unaware of or distracted from this fact. And this dependence is intrinsic. There's nothing we can do about it to alter it or change it or get rid of it. It just is what it is. And this gets back into, what do we have control over? What do we not? How do we embrace each of those? This is part of embracing one of the things that we kind of don't have control over. And remembering this keeps our heads on straight. It allows us to stay in connection with the wider scope of existence in all its dynamism, its changeability, its excitingness, its horror sometimes, its epicness. I mean, we are part of an infinitely large and dynamic whole. And this large and dynamic whole is growing and learning a billion things all at the same time, both through us and alongside us and around us all the time. And a lot of the work, quote unquote, capital W, is really about learning to recognize this dependence and this interdependence with the world around us and to embrace it. And if we want to call that God, I mean, sometimes that helps us understand that there is something larger than us, larger than our puny, confused ego. And again, it's there whether we acknowledge it or not. So when it comes to something like worrying, I think worrying can be a sense that we are distrusting the process playing out in this universe around us. And I think that's really challenging to contemplate because, especially for myself, I knew I was going to do this talk. I really felt like it was very much a part of my human adulting, as it were. But my body was in rebellion. Like, it was just anxious and shaky and nauseous and keeping me up. And this is my anxious pattern playing out, and I know it and I recognize it, and I'm like, well, as much as it doesn't feel good, I know that there's good stuff on the other side of it. And if I just embrace the fact that there is more to me than my terrified ego, then I can get through it. And we talked last week about how scandalously, we and God are not separate. We're not exactly distinct entities. So in trusting God or trusting our dependence on God, it's kind of like we are trusting that we are that. And that more is possible than we allow ourselves to realize.
Let me give you one concrete example of worry as irresponsibility.
Yeah.
So let's say you have a dog and you're going to take that dog for a walk, and you are really, really worried and anxious about something. You go up, Nora's laughing at me. You go up and you snap the leash on that dog, and you know what that dog is going to do? They are going to pick up on your worry and get worried too.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even know what you're worried about. They don't care. They just perceive, oh, the human is worried.
Yeah, they don't need your story. They just feel it.
And so they act in concert with your worry, which means you walk out the door, the dog is worried, he's looking around, sees a stranger, and immediately starts lunging for the stranger because the dog is worried, and, he's expressing what is going on with you internally. So it may be a little bit irresponsible to walk a dog while worried. Could be.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, just everyday practical example. And, I mean, this goes for children, too. I think they pick up on it in the same way, and it impacts them, and that can be very confusing and disorienting.
Yeah, and, Nora was walking around all week. She was worried and anxious about this. I could feel that from her. But because I am a responsible human being, I didn't have to take that on. Right. A dog has to take it on. I have a special mantra for these situations, which is, not my circus, not my monkeys. I just kept saying that to myself all week.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and if he had taken it on, it would have been a feedback loop for me. It would have been bad. Yeah. It would have been just feeding into what I was experiencing and making me feel even more unsettled, because it's like, oh, if he's worried, that means there's something to be worried about. That's not good. Uh-oh. Yeah. So he was helping me to kind of, even when I felt the anxiety catching me, his steadfastness gave me something to check myself against and be like, okay, my body's doing its thing, but I don't have to live there right now. I don't have to let my head get stuck there and then be paralyzed by that. So thanks, man. Love you. He made it so much easier. Okay. Yeah, this is kind of one of those let go, let God type things when we talk about, acknowledging our dependence on God, the one, the force. Trust the force. It's important. Do you have anything else to add about that?
No, I think you've covered that quite well.
Yeah. So I do not want to dictate to you what the order of your priorities should be, but we do kind of have some guidelines in the nine-sided circle about that, because we have to, when we are asked to support someone, this is how we help them, having come to us looking for our perspective, to delineate what their values are and in what order they should be enacted. You have to have priorities. You got to figure out where you're going to invest your energy first so it can go forward and feed you towards going to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So as I mentioned, it has to start with yourself. So that means you got to maintain your capacity to act in the world. You're going to be doing this by fulfilling your own basic needs for food, shelter, and relative safety. Because you can't even think straight. I mean, you got to sleep too, and you got to have water. If you want to be able to move forward to the next thing, which is what we call your family, which is including your everyone who's dependent on you and those who you are caring for, how can you be there for them if you are not there for yourself? This is that whole thing with the, you got to put your own oxygen mask on before you put it on your child, because you need to be able to function. It's critical. I think people try to skip to the next thing where they think they need to respond to their child or their partner before they satisfy their own most visceral needs. And sometimes that has to happen, but at core, if we're at death's door, we can't be there for them. We have to make sure we're always above that threshold at the very least. And then we can turn just a little bit more outward to our most intimate circle. And that means being there for our children, being there for our partners and our parents and our siblings and our best friends and those we have committed to do caretaking work for. You hold to the commitments of your closest bonds, and you reap the benefits of being in close relationship with those other beings. It's kind of like this self-sustaining, circulating energy thing. And eventually, this expands, you're able to function, your children are fed. Okay, so now I can focus on doing more than just collecting the scraps. I can do an occupation. I can commit to my job. I can commit to my career. So this is respecting your means of making a living, which is critical to your sustained survival and to the loved ones who depend on you to provide for them. And once you have that rolling, you can extend care to others outside your immediate circle of responsibility as you go along. So this is going to be like, giving of your money, not just like, sharing a meal of like your most basic stuff that you have to share with your neighbor because it's an emergency. We're talking about like, oh, I want to give money to this library, or I want to help build a new homeless shelter, that kind of thing. You're able to expand your circle of influence and to bring more people into your circle of care. And then once you've kind of gotten that ball rolling, once you've gotten your basic needs met, your most visceral basic needs, and you've gotten your family attended to and your best friends and everyone who's dependent on you taken care of, finally, you can start turning inward again. And you can do those things that involve self-actualizing and waking up being on your spiritual path in a more dedicated and specific sort of way. And if you're starving or sick or giving intensive care to someone or otherwise unable to focus due to situational stress, you're just not there yet, and that's okay. Or maybe you're just like sporadically focused on your path. It's okay. You're building up to this priority. And as you'll notice, all of these things are kind of connected. When you get to this, top of Maslow's hierarchy, the energy that you've gained all along the way is further fuel for the whole list of things. So as you end up deepening your spiritual path, you're going to find that you have more energy to devote to taking care of yourself, your family, perhaps to your career, and everything is interconnected. They're not necessarily separate, but sometimes you have to get to that point to realize the truth of that.
And we might point out that if your spiritual path asks you to step away from your family, your friends, your work, and everything else, it might not be a really good spiritual path.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we do not recommend here. Yeah, I mean, we really want your care for your loved ones to be part of your spiritual practice. Okay. So Mr. Keene says, I understand my responsibility is to be awake in general, then down to the responsibilities and specific to the circumstances of the moment. I think that's, I definitely feel like being awake lends itself to being able to handle an array of specific responsibilities, yes. So, yes, Mr. Keene mentions my Eckhart Tolle quote, which was part of the email we did as our announcement for this talk today, which was, when you are aligned with the now internally, when you take responsibility for this moment, then life is helpful and tends to bring you what you need. Yes. Yep. How to explain this alignment between the now and internally? Can we say being awake is the alignment? I would say yes.
Yeah. You got 2 yeses.
Yep. Yeah, that is what I had in mind when I chose that quote. I mean, who knows what Eckhart Tolle himself meant? I'm not in his brain, but as far as my intention for that quote, yes, that is what I meant. Yeah. So Weil says, so responsibility starts outward, then only then it's ready to go inward.
That's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah, because all responsibility starts inward. It can move from inward, it can be the impulse inwardly to do the outward things, to accept responsibility for the outward things. That's practice for accepting responsibility for the inward things.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Does that make sense? Well, cool. So, one of the last things I want to touch on is about taking responsibility, quote unquote. I feel like in a lot of political discourse right now, there's talk about accountability, responsibility, and such, and I don't necessarily want to speak on that directly, but I would love to offer some, my personal perspective on what taking responsibility is and is not. So, taking responsibility involves respect for yourself and others, This is important, and I think it's something that is a fundamental value of the nine-sided circle, this respect for yourself and others, and upholding the dignity of yourself and others, you know, to the best degree that you're able to. And establishing and navigating along healthy boundaries. So this gets into plugging the leaks, you know, not taking on things that aren't yours, and not, you know, sometimes you need help from outside to realize where you're perhaps interacting in a codependent way with someone. That is why it is so important to have someone that you can talk to and get feedback from around situations in your life, because that helps you figure out your healthy boundaries. You know, this is important, and it's not necessarily the focus of this talk today, but it is relevant to taking responsibility for sure. And you need to be open to do influence in new learning. So we've talked about do influence before, Mush Talk. Would you mind giving us a little thought about
refresher?
that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a term that we blatantly stole from, what's the guy's name?
Oh man, I don't know.
Yeah, he's written some really interesting thing on cults. He was a member of the Moonies at one point in his young life and got out of them, got a PhD, became a therapist, has been helping people get out of cults, written a couple of good books.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to check
You
him
know,
out, you probably just search for like deprogramming.
Yeah.
I think he's considered one of the top specialists in that field. So
Yeah, and not in the we're going to kidnap you and lock you in a
No.
room and waterboard you until you agree to believe what we want you to. Not
No.
that kind of deprogramming.
Nope. But the kind where
Hassan,
you,
something Hassan.
God, Hassan is his last
Steve,
name. I
yeah,
think.
Steve Hassan, I think is his name.
I think you're right. It's something like
Yeah.
that.
Something like that.
All right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
we stole the term from him, so credit where credit is due. And he pointed out that there is due influence, which is like if Chris and I are working and we're talking about his development, I will exert due influence on him by suggesting certain things that he will listen to and then take in or not as he chooses.
Mm-hmm.
But he is likely to take it in because he has allowed me to have this influence. As opposed to undue influence, where I would just come in without his permission and manipulate him into a certain pattern of thought or behavior.
Yeah. Healthy boundaries, learning about healthy boundaries. This is what that's
Yep.
about.
And due influence always has the consent of the one being influenced.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
People don't understand this.
Yeah, because this is a way for you to be supported in growing and learning by allowing due influence into your life, whether you take up on it or not. And if this is about human adulthood in the end and waking up, then growing is going to be an intrinsic part of this. Changing, evolving rather, specifically. And also seeing where we're on the track that we want to be in, and we want to progress on that. So due influence has both of those things kind of packed into it. So from there, taking responsibility involves a willingness to act from or shift back into alignment with your values, even when it's challenging. And this means when we're afraid or angry and we lash out or recoil from whatever we've committed to be responsive to, we can take a beat and then, embrace that we need to pivot back to that. We will fuck up. It's okay though, because we can always return to that center. And for me this week, I knew that one of my values was growing and loyalty. I am loyal to the work that I do. And I really want to grow as a human being out of my ego. And I have to overcome this obstacle of leading a talk in order to do that. So even though I did have moments where part of me was like, oh, I don't want to, I always brought myself back to knowing that I was committed to my values. So taking responsibility also involves making amends where you can when you make a mistake or otherwise hurt someone. Except when making amends, as a practice, would unnecessarily hurt someone, including yourself further. And this is challenging because I think sometimes right now we are quick to give and expect people to apologize us or to make amends, but they may not really be in it when they do it. And they may just kind of be doing it in a panicky sort of way, or because we are making them, we can't make people feel pressured, but they are internalizing our desire for them to make amends. And so everybody rushes into it. And nothing is really resolved on that soul felt level. Or perhaps, we do feel this sense that like we're ready to apologize, but we know reaching out would be, we're ready to apologize for our part in something, let's say. But we realize reaching out to the person that we feel we may have hurt in the larger scheme of some mutual pain is just either going to cause them to be totally like reactivated over the experience. You haven't talked for like 20 years and it's like, why are you talking to me now? I was done with this. Or for yourself even, like I stopped talking to this person for a reason, and I feel remorse for my part in our relationship falling apart, but I know if I reach out to them, then it's going to just lead to more pain. Like, this is where we need to be very discerning. But we can always take responsibility within our hearts for the things that we've done, even if we can't necessarily take overt action on that. That's something we'll always have to think about. And then when it comes to taking responsibility in light of other people, encouraging others, particularly by way of our example, setting the example, to be true to our own values, and to uphold their responsibilities and commitments. I mean, we cannot pressure people to do that. We have to live it. We have to live it ourselves before we can expect others to do the same. So, taking responsibility does not involve giving up one's rightful autonomy or agency to others. It does not include claiming responsibility for things that are not our responsibility in the hope of appeasing, impressing, or managing someone else in some way. This is when we get into treating people like objects, sometimes ourselves. That's not okay. And we don't want to perform responsibleness or accountability in order to avoid or lessen punishment. I mean, that's more avoidance in a way than taking responsibility. And sometimes we need to choose to not engage. That's a thing. And sometimes people will come at us wanting us to take a punishment, but we kind of have to stand in our own sense of agency, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And we have to know, again, where our values lie so that we can respond in a way that is appropriate to the situation. And the consequences will be what they are. Taking responsibility does not involve coercing someone else to claim responsibility or perform accountability. Again, it's the same trap, just for the other person. They're not really acting from a place of agency or a sense of ownership and commitment if we're coercing them. And likewise, coercing someone to live by your values or otherwise give a fuck about the same things you give a fuck about, that's not taking responsibility either. So there we have it. Any thoughts on that? Or any questions on that?
We know you have questions. Don't be shy.
If I may ask for your advice, one finds oneself in an adult awake state, and they realize what their responsibilities to themselves actually are, but find themselves living in a society that is completely the opposite of that. Completely the opposite of that. What is your advice to someone living almost two lives, where they're fully aware of what needs to be done, but find themselves overwhelmed by living in a community, a society, a country, and a region that just feels so much bigger than them? What would your advice to somebody like that be?
I mean, it's real. Like, I really want to... I had that in mind as I was working on this. Like, of course, I'm living within the context of being an American, having a lot of flexibility in terms of the way I might want to live my life for all intents and purposes. And most of our audience may be living in a similar milieu, but there are many who are not. And we've talked previously about... Bye, Jonathan. Thanks for being here. We've talked about, like, as Mushtaq says, not scaring the straights, right? And I feel like that kind of has a role to play in that sometimes it is necessary to adapt to context, let's say. But within that, if we are living through an awake state or as a human adult, we are both engaging with the milieu we find ourselves in and also finding ways in which we can basically stay sane, you know, really be ourselves. And sometimes that does have to happen behind closed doors, unfortunately. But we have to keep that spark alive. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because, I mean, again, I'm using the queer community as an example because it's one that is something that is only now starting to become more discussable even in my culture. And there's a long history of having to live a life behind closed doors that is secret from anyone outside of those doors. Because you're taking responsibility for your own safety, perhaps. If you value your own safety, then that's going to be a priority for you. If you value your privacy, if you value your autonomy, then you might have to practice a degree of secrecy.
Yeah, speaking as somebody who has lived in a couple of countries where this is an actual problem, I can say that it is really necessary to develop a public face, to be, this is the being in the world part of the public face, is
Right.
to put on your disguise every morning and go out and look like somebody who is not a problem. But in your inner state, you are a problem, and you know that. And you can sprinkle a little sand in the gears here and there, as you choose. You know, a little Caro syrup in the crankcase of the vast machine. But
Right.
it has to be done in a way that does not get the man down on your back.
Yep.
Because some of these places, there are actual serious consequences to doing things. Like here, you know, here in the States, I can go outside and say, fuck God and the flag and all of this kind of stuff. And, you know, it's like, there's not much in the way of consequences for that. If I go to other places and say, this religion is bullshit, I could get killed.
Yep.
And I prefer not to get killed. So, learning to create the appropriate disguise for being in public is a necessary thing, and it's part of being responsible.
Yeah. That's exactly what I think too. And it's part of being awake too. It's that sense of consciously, you know, being awake to what is and acting accordingly. Yes, to be a sly rascal rebel, Sydney. Yes,
Yes.
definitely. Yep. So
And
is
Sydney
that
has
helpful?
a-
Well, yeah, I definitely want to get to her question too. That's great. I'm glad. Okay, so Sydney asks, can the realization that one has responsibility in life be the zero shock in the Enneagram of human adulthood? What do you think, Mushtak? Would that be 0 or 1?
Oh, that can definitely be 0. That can be the zero shock that gets you on the Enneagram of human adulthood.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Yep. Good question. Yeah.
I've been reflecting on the shocks as well, and I started to wonder about something, but maybe getting to Sydney's question first, to stay on that thread, would be worth doing. But I wanted to ask about the shock points too.
Okay, yeah, let's follow up on Sydney's question, and then we'll jump right back to that, Chris. So Sydney further asks, can that, you mean the realization, Sydney? Can that realization come in at different points, or is it a prerequisite, do you think, Mushtak?
I think it's a prerequisite for the Enneagram of human adulthood, but it can come in at different points of other Enneagrams of personal development. Because why should anything be simple?
Good questions, though. Okay, so Chris was asking about shock points. Do you want to say a little more?
Yeah, so responsibility as it relates to, and it's responsibility and agency as it relates to shock points. You know, and there's at a particular point where surrender is key,
Yes.
so you have agency playing into that. But I guess one question is each one of the shock points a surrender point to bring it, like, to create space for the new energy or new thing to come in, or is there another way of looking at it? Because I was
No, the zero shock is an observation point. It's a thing of, oh, this is different. Shock 1 is intentional. I have to do this. I'm going to push myself through. And shock at the 6th point is the surrender point.
Nice. So the surrender comes at point 6. So
Yeah.
in that way,
The hard one.
Yes. How does agency relate to this, and responsibility relate to surrender at this point?
Well, you can only surrender if you have agency.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, think about it. If I coerce you into surrendering, you haven't surrendered. And it is your will to surrender, to let go. It's a little bit of a paradox.
Yep. Would the 6th shock be Noor's question 5? I mean, I think so. My question 5 was, do you depend on God? Like, coming to terms with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question, Sydney.
That's awesome. Great question. Thank you.
No problem. Good stuff. So I would love to hear from Lavita. What's on your mind?
Nothing. I literally just dropped this into the hopper because I found myself feeling resistant to some of it. So I said, I need to think about this rather than react to it. So I will probably have more to say about it after you guys have eaten dinner and gone to bed and caught a nap.
Oh, that's why we have the forum.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I know there are pieces in this that are challengeable. Let's put it that way.
And that reminds me that there's one thing that we need to clarify on this, because it is one of the ultimate mistakes of the New Agers.
Yeah.
And that's the concept of you caused everything that happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore you have to be responsible for everything that happened to you. And frankly, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
You do not cause everything that happened to you. And the only thing you are responsible for is your response to what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Your own internal response. And that's going to take some work in some cases. But, the car careens off of the street, jumps the curb and hits you. You didn't cause that. I'm sorry. For you to have caused that means that you would be God, and if you cause that and you're God, you're a pretty stupid God. So,
yeah, it took me a while to catch up with that one a few years ago, because honestly, if that's the case, if I cause everything that happens to me, I want to know where my duffel bag of cash is.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Amen. Yep.
Yeah, so you do not cause everything that happens to you. The universe is bigger than you. You can cause some of the things that happen to you, and that you get to take responsibility for. But there is this random factor to the universe. Someday, the dice just come up snake eyes.
Yep. Yeah. So, Lavita, I just want you to know that your resistance is welcome. Whatever comes up, it's all good.
Yeah. I was really trying to just listen rather than have an internal argument about one thing or another. So, like I said, it's processing in the back of my mind.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we welcome the argument, and the truth be told, especially with you, we're likely to learn something from your argument, so bring it on.
Well, it's not an argument. It's more like, really? And I find from over the years, when I feel like that, I need to think about it more deeply. Now, I might turn around, a few days from now and go, okay, no, this is why. This
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and that's
And
great.
then other times it's, I never thought about it that way. I
Yeah.
got to change how I think about this now. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm at.
I love that. That feels really good. Thank you.
Would you like to wrap this up with the hadith, assuming that we've heard from everybody that we need to hear
Yeah.
from? Or
Mr.
haven't we
Keem,
heard
did
from?
you, Malu and Roland? Come on, you guys.
Here we go.
Sorry. Everybody's got to be put on the spot, like, at least once.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to add, but this talk comes at a wonderful point in time.
Oh, wow,
It,
thank you.
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah. Thank you.
For me, I don't have anything to say much myself. I'm very glad I made it here again. And
Me
good to see
too.
you all.
It's just so good to see you guys here. We weren't sure if you were going to make it, given all the craziness going on in your home country, but it's really nice to have you. Thanks. Mr. Keem, are you good? Got any other thoughts you want to share? No. Okay, so I guess we can wrap it up. So, yeah. We have a hadith because, of course, you know, this is the background that Mushtaq and I come from, is our, you know, connection to Sufism and such. So the quote, the hadith, the saying of the Prophet Muhammad that I want to read to you guys today, just to kind of act as a bookend, is, whosoever of you sees an evil action, let him change it with his hand. And if he is not able to do so, then with his tongue. And if he is not able to do so, then with his heart. And that is the minimum expression of his conviction. So there you have it. And that's our talk. It was kind of a long one. Thank you so much for being here with me and in your own ways supporting me through this. I really appreciate that a lot. Thank you. Yay. Got any wrap-up thoughts, Mushtaq?
Just that we're going to have another rip-roaring talk again at 6:30 p.m. That talk is going to be on the work. What is the work and where did it come from? Or as I like to call it, the secret of al-amal.
I see Wild's face. His interest is piqued. Yay.
Yeah, well, he's been hearing that word at least 5 times a day for probably his entire life. And this is, I'm convinced, where Gurdjieff got the term "the work" from.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because he also heard it, given where he lived. He heard that phrase. There's this phrase that you hear at least 5 times a day. We're going to talk about that tonight. So if you get really interested in what the hell I'm talking about, come tonight.
Yep.
And
So
we will reveal secrets.
Yeah, we'll say more about that this evening. Okay, so let's go to Brady Bunch mode. I'm sad to see that a couple people had to head out, but we have many lovely people here.
Brady Bunch mode!
All right, so let's wave goodbye to everyone who's watching.
Goodbye, folks.
Both here and on YouTube, thank you so much, and we will see you again soon.